In the heart of a rundown neighborhood, snow and ice blanket the streets. The buildings are crumbling, windows broken, and the air is filled with the sounds of distant traffic and the crunch of footsteps on frozen sidewalks. Jamal, a 10-year-old boy, moves swiftly through the cold streets, his breath visible in the frigid air. His clothes are worn, his shoes battered, but there's a quiet determination in his eyes. He walks alone, a child whose innocence has long been replaced with the survival instincts of a streetwise kid. Living with his aunt in a small apartment, Jamal knows that help doesn't come easily, and kindness is a rare gift in his world. As Jamal walks, he hears a sudden series of explosions that shake the air. His heart skips a beat as the sound of a car crashing echoes through the street. He looks up to see a car, engulfed in flames, having crashed into an abandoned building. The smoke rises thick into the sky, obscuring the view. Panic surges through the crowd of onlookers, but Jamal's focus sharpens as something catches his attention, a frantic barking from the direction of the fire. Jamal's eyes scan the scene, his heart racing. Beneath the smoke and debris, he spots it. A small white puppy, trapped beneath a heap of twisted metal and glass. The puppy whimpers, its fur singed, struggling to free itself from the wreckage. Jamal doesn't hesitate. He knows the dangers of fire, of debris, but his heart doesn't think of his own safety. Without a second thought, he rushes toward the burning wreckage. His legs move faster, his breath short from the cold air. He dodges falling debris, keeping his eyes locked on the tiny animal. The flames crackle louder, and the heat begins to intensify, but Jamal's focus is unwavering. With a burst of strength, he lifts the debris off the puppy, who barks in relief as Jamal scoops it up. The puppy trembles in his arms, but Jamal's grip is firm as he rushes toward safety, never looking back at the danger he's left behind. As Jamal runs, the smoke stings his eyes, but his body presses forward with a speed born of instinct. His hands, cold and raw from the harsh winter, hold the small, trembling puppy close to his chest. He sprints toward the crowd that has gathered, people now watching in awe at his bravery. Some shout, some gasp, but all Jamal hears is the sound of the puppy's frantic breathing against his chest. Jamal reaches the edge of the crowd and places the puppy gently on the ground, where a concerned bystander rushes to help. He steps back, his chest heaving, as the adrenaline begins to fade. The puppy's frantic barking slowly calms, and Jamal watches as it's wrapped in blankets, a small but victorious smile crossing his face. He's saved a life. No questions, no hesitation. But amidst the cheers and murmurs of admiration from the crowd, Jamal notices a few lingering eyes, hesitant to recognize his bravery. Some stare at him with suspicion. He's just a boy from the wrong side of the tracks, after all. The whispers begin almost immediately. What's he doing here? He doesn't belong near something like this. The judgment is subtle, but present. Jamal, however, doesn't let it affect him. He's been judged all his life, but today he's done something no one expected. Today, he's been a hero. Despite the murmurs, Jamal quietly walks away from the scene, his heart still pounding in his chest. He doesn't care what the onlookers think. He did the right thing, and that's all that matters. The next day, a call comes in to the local authorities, directed specifically at Jamal. The voice on the other end, calm but insistent, introduces itself as Victor, the millionaire businessman who owns the car that was destroyed in the accident. He thanks Jamal for saving his puppy and insists on meeting him. Jamal, initially confused, agrees, still not fully grasping the magnitude of what he has done. When Jamal meets Victor, He's led to a luxurious mansion on the outskirts of town, a world far removed from the cold, broken streets Jamal knows all too well. Victor greets him warmly, but with a hint of disbelief in his eyes. "I heard about what you did," Victor says, his voice full of gratitude. "You saved my puppy, my daughter's puppy. She's been crying all day, devastated over the loss of him. You've given me a chance to show her kindness, and for that I am truly grateful." Jamal stands silently, unsure of what to say. Victor continues, "You showed more courage than most people I know. I want to make sure you're properly rewarded." And that's when Victor makes an offer that Jamal never saw coming. "I want to offer you a chance. You've proven you're more than just the boy they see. You're a hero. I'd like to bring you into my family to give you a future that you deserve. I can offer you education, resources, and a place in my world." Jamal stands frozen for a moment, struggling to believe what he's hearing. He doesn't come from this world. He's a poor kid from the streets, a world that has always viewed him as a statistic. But here, in this grand mansion, Jamal is being offered a chance to rewrite his story. Victor's offer goes beyond just the puppy. It's an offer of hope, of transformation, and of belonging. As Jamal considers it, he realizes that this moment, this act of saving a life, has changed his world forever. The scene opens at the luxurious mansion of Lena and Mark Graves. They had spent years building a life filled with wealth, but a longing for a child had always left them feeling incomplete. After years of waiting and hoping, their dreams finally came true when they adopted Sasha, a small puppy they had found abandoned in a dumpster years ago. Sasha had become a beloved part of their family, filling their hearts and home with joy. On a peaceful evening, as Mark and Lena share dinner together, a loud explosion shatters the calm. Smoke rises from a nearby street and sirens wail. Concern fills their faces. Lena turns to Mark, her worry clear. "What's going on?" she asks. Mark rushes to the door. From the mansion's front windows he sees a commotion. A young boy is carrying Sasha in his arms, emerging from a cloud of smoke. Mark strides outside, confusion and anger flooding him. "What the hell is going on?" he demands, approaching the boy. Jamal, a 10-year-old black boy, is exhausted. His clothes covered in ash, but his grip on Sasha is firm. His eyes are wide with concern, but he's trying to catch his breath. I saw the car crash," he stammers, his voice shaking. "Sasha was stuck under some debris. I had to get her out." Mark's face hardens. He looks the boy over, suspicion creeping in. "Who are you? Why are you here with my dog?" he demands, his voice rising with frustration. Jamal, confused by the hostility, explains, "I saved her. She was stuck, and I couldn't leave her there." Mark isn't convinced. "What's your angle, huh? Why should I trust you?" he sneers, looking at the boy with disdain. "You think you can just come here and play hero?" Lena steps out from the door, her voice soft but firm. "Mark, stop," she says, placing a hand on his arm. "Look at him. He's just a kid. He saved Sasha." Mark glances at Lena, still skeptical, but the emotion in her voice stops him from speaking further. He looks down at Sasha, now safe in Jamal's arms. Her once frightened eyes are calm, and she looks up at Mark with trust. Lena walks toward Jamal, kneeling in front of him. "Thank you," she says, her voice full of warmth. "You saved our family's heart." Jamal, overwhelmed by the kindness, nods, not knowing how to respond. Mark, still conflicted, steps closer, his expression softer than before. "I'm sorry," he says, the words coming out reluctantly. "I should have trusted you." Jamal looks up at him, relieved, but still unsure. "I just wanted to help," he says quietly, his voice steady, despite the exhaustion. The mood shifts as Mark and Lena exchange glances, understanding how much Jamal's actions meant. Mark, after a pause, places a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You've done something we couldn't have imagined. Thank you for saving her." The tension that had filled the air begins to lift, as Mark and Lena both recognize the selflessness in Jamal's actions. They no longer see him as just a boy from the streets, but as someone who had the courage to risk his life to save their family's precious dog. Sasha, now calm and safe, looks at her rescuers with affection. For Jamal, it's not just about the rescue. It's about something much bigger. He has made an impact on the world, and in doing so, earned a place in their lives. The tension in the mansion was palpable. The warmth of the home contrasted sharply with the cold, uncomfortable exchange between Jamal and the Graves family. Mark stood across from Jamal, still filled with skepticism, while Lena had been wrestling with conflicting emotions. She wanted to thank this boy for saving their precious puppy, but there was a lingering discomfort in her heart. She didn't know if this act of heroism was enough to erase her doubts. Jamal stood nervously in the grand living room, his small frame making the massive space feel even more intimidating. His eyes nervously darted around, unsure of what to do or say. Just hours ago, he was alone on the icy streets, trying to survive. Now, he was standing in the mansion of the very family whose puppy he had just saved. The transformation was jarring, and he felt like a stranger in a world far beyond his reach. Lena, with her heart torn, slowly walked up to Jamal. She saw something in his eyes, something that reassured her. It wasn't just about the puppy. It was about the courage he displayed when others would have hesitated. She couldn't ignore the sincerity in him. She had seen something in Jamal that gave her hope. A hope that maybe the world could be better, that kindness could still exist. "Jamal," Lena said softly, her voice carrying both warmth and uncertainty. "You've done more than we could ever have expected from someone in your position. I want you to know how much we appreciate it." Her words barely registered with Mark. He still stood by the door, his arms crossed, eyeing the situation warily. His suspicion hadn't faded, not even after seeing the connection between Jamal and Sasha, their puppy, who seemed to follow Jamal with adoration. Mark's eyes narrowed. "I still don't understand how you found her. And what's your angle here, boy?" "I don't trust it," he snapped. Jamal flinched at the hostility in Mark's tone. He had faced many forms of judgment in his life, poverty, race, and his circumstances, but hearing it from the person he had just saved the puppy for hurt more than he expected. He tried to speak, but found that words failed him. Isabella, the housekeeper, interrupted, casting a dark shadow over the scene. She looked at Jamal as though he were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be appreciated. "Why are we rewarding this kid? He's probably just looking for a handout," she muttered, her voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. Lena stepped forward, her voice firm, silencing Isabella. "That's enough, Isabella," she said, turning toward her with a mix of disappointment and authority. "Jamal didn't ask for anything. He saved Sasha's life, and for that, he deserves our respect." Isabella, shocked by Lena's words, stayed silent, her eyes dropping to the floor. Mark didn't say anything either, but still wore an expression of doubt. He wasn't sure what to think. His instincts told him to distrust someone like Jamal, a young boy from the streets who had shown up in their perfect world, acting as if he belonged. The room fell into an uneasy quiet as Jamal shifted on his feet. He didn't belong here, he knew it. This mansion was a world so far removed from his own that it might as well have been on another planet. He'd saved their puppy, yes, but at what cost? The tension in the room grew, and for a brief moment, Jamal questioned whether he had made a mistake by helping them at all. Just then, Sasha, their puppy, began barking excitedly. The little dog, who had been a symbol of joy in their lives for so long, ran over to Jamal, nuzzling into his legs. Without hesitation, she leapt into his arms and licked his face with affection. Jamal held her tightly, a mix of warmth and sadness in his heart. He didn't understand why this little creature trusted him so much, but it made him feel a little less out of place. Lena, watching the scene unfold, felt a shift in her heart. She saw the way Sasha responded to Jamal, the way the dog, who had been her companion for so long, looked at him with absolute trust. It was something Lena hadn't seen before, something powerful and real. She walked over to Jamal, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You did more than just save a puppy today," she said, her voice soft but full of sincerity. "You showed us what it means to care, to risk your life for another. And for that, we're grateful." Jamal, still shocked by her words, looked up at her. He hadn't expected this. In fact, he hadn't expected anything but suspicion and fear. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't invisible, like he had made a difference. Despite everything, despite the doubts, Lena had seen the good in him. With a deep breath, he nodded slowly, unsure of what to say but feeling a small flicker of hope. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lena smiled, her face full of empathy. "You're welcome, Jamal." The scene was quiet, save for the sound of Sasha's happy yips. It was in that moment, as the puppy snuggled against Jamal, that something changed. The coldness that had permeated the room seemed to melt, and for the first time, Jamal felt like he had found a place in a world that had often seemed so indifferent to him. Later that evening, Mark stood alone in the study, his eyes focused on the empty chair across from him. He'd been pacing for hours, replaying the events of the day in his mind. His anger had clouded his judgment, and now, sitting in the quiet of the room, he felt a deep sense of regret. He could still hear the words he had said to Jamal, the disbelief, the accusations, all directed at the boy who had saved his family's beloved puppy. Mark had let his biases and pride control his reactions, and he knew it was wrong. Lena stood in the doorway, her expression soft but firm. She had been waiting for Mark to come to this realization. "Mark," she said gently, "we rescued Sasha from the streets when she was nothing but a tiny, abandoned puppy. We nursed her back to health, gave her a home, and now we've turned our backs on the very person who saved her." Mark turned to face her, his eyes filled with shame. "I know, Lana. I was blinded by my own pride. I saw a kid from the streets, and I assumed the worst. I let my fears control me, and in doing so, I've pushed away the very person who gave us the gift of saving our puppy." Lena crossed the room and stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's not too late to make it right, Mark. We've been given a second chance, just like we gave Sasha a second chance. We can offer Jamal a new beginning, one where he's not judged by where he comes from, but by the courage he showed to help us." Mark looked at Lena, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. He felt the weight of his mistakes, but also the glimmer of hope that perhaps he could redeem himself, not just for the sake of Jamal, but for the sake of his own soul. The next morning, Mark and Lena decided to take action. They reached out to Jamal, unsure of how he would respond after their previous treatment. They called him to meet at the mansion, hoping to offer an apology and an opportunity. When Jamal arrived, he was wary, unsure of what to expect. The mansion was a stark contrast to his own life, and the sight of it made him feel out of place. Mark and Lena met him in the foyer, both of them looking more humbled than Jamal had ever seen them. "Jamal," Mark began, his voice quieter than usual, "we owe you an apology. We were wrong to accuse you. You saved our puppy, and for that, we are forever grateful. Our actions were unfair, and we want to make things right." He paused, his gaze softening. "We would be honored if you would stay with us. You deserve a place where you're treated with kindness, and we want to give you that." Jamal stood there, stunned by their words. He had expected an apology, but never anything like this. He had never been offered anything beyond suspicion and disdain from those in positions of power. But here, in this grand house, stood two people willing to extend an olive branch. After a long pause, Jamal nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you," he said softly. "I don't know what to say. I never thought anyone would care." Lena stepped forward, her voice warm. "You deserve to be cared for, Jamal, just like Sasha did. You're part of our family now." Days passed, and Jamal settled into his new life with the Graves family. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and distance, slowly transformed into a place where Jamal felt accepted and loved. The walls, once cold and imposing, began to feel like home. Mark and Lena showed him kindness every day, their actions speaking louder than any apology. As Jamal spent time with Sasha, he couldn't help but see the similarities between their journeys. Just like the puppy, he had been abandoned and overlooked, but now they both had a second chance at life. Jamal's transformation was gradual, but every day he grew more confident in his new life and in himself. Mark and Lena shared stories about how they had found Sasha on the streets, abandoned, covered in filth. They had cleaned her up, nurtured her, and given her the love she deserved. It was a story that resonated deeply with Jamal, who had always felt like an outsider, just like Sasha had once been. He knew what it felt like to be disregarded, but now he understood what it felt like to be given a chance. And so, Jamal's new beginning unfolded. The boy, who had been nothing but a street survivor, now had a family who truly saw him. The home, once filled with tension and uncertainty, was now a place of warmth and acceptance. The bond between Jamal, Sasha, Mark, and Lena grew stronger every day. Jamal, a boy who once fought just to survive, was now part of a family, learning that compassion could exist in even the most unlikely of places. And for the first time in his life, Jamal felt like he truly belonged. Jamal runs his fingers through Sasha's fur as the puppy, now grown into a loyal companion, happily bounds around him. They laugh together, with the snow-covered trees and the soft glow of the winter sun setting behind them. The warm light feels like a reflection of the newfound warmth in Jamal's life. Mark and Lena stand on the porch, watching the scene unfold with pride, their faces filled with quiet admiration. They've witnessed Jamal's transformation. He's no longer the boy who was judged by his past. He is a son, a part of their family. As Jamal looks up, catching their gaze, a smile spreads across his face. His once shy eyes now radiate confidence, a stark contrast to the boy who had stepped into their lives just weeks ago. The bond between him and Sasha has flourished, and it's a testament to how much has changed for both of them. From two abandoned souls to a family united by love and mutual respect. Mark walks over to Jamal, his footsteps soft against the snow. He kneels beside the young boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't just save a puppy," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved our hearts." Jamal's eyes shine with gratitude, and for the first time in his life, he feels truly seen. Sasha rests her head on his lap, content and at peace, knowing she is no longer that scared puppy from the streets. Lena joins them, standing beside Mark. She smiles warmly at Jamal. "We're proud of you," she says softly, her voice full of love. "You've shown us what true courage and compassion look like." Jamal, with Sasha nestled in his arms, looks at the two of them. His voice trembles with emotion, but there's strength in it. "Thank you. I never knew a family could feel like this." The camera slowly pulls back, capturing the entire scene, a perfect moment of peace and belonging. Jamal, once lost and isolated, is now surrounded by the family he never thought he'd have. His future is filled with endless possibilities, not just as the boy who saved a puppy, but as the son they all needed. As the final image fades, the sound of laughter and soft conversation echoes in the distance, a reminder that family isn't just about blood, but about the love and support that binds people together.